Karakia timatanga.
Morena tātou, and welcome to the Civil Defence Emergency Management Group Joint Committee meeting, which is being held today, Friday, the 27th of September 2024. We are hosted this morning in the whare of Western Bay of Plenty District Council. Thank you, Your Worship, Nedenia. And we are opening our meeting, our hui, this morning at 10 a.m. I'd like to invite, please, Chris Brewer, one of our emergency management planning managers, to open our hui with karakia this morning. If we can please all be upstanding. Kia tū tātou.
Karakia timatanga. Tu tawa mai I runga, tu tawa mai I raro, tu tawa mai I roto, tu tawa mai I waho. Kia tau ai te mauritu, te mauri ora, ki te katoa. Haumi e, hui e, tai kie.
Ngā mihi, thank you, Planning Manager Brewer, for opening our hui this morning. Morning, everyone. Welcome to our Civil Defence Emergency Management Group meeting this morning. It is our final meeting for the calendar year of 2024 as we get to the scurrying, dare I say, to the end of the finish line. It has been a very busy year. Elected members, for our operational staff, for our team. We thank you for all your contribution this year. I have a reminder statement for all our participating members this morning regarding the recording of our meeting. A gentle reminder, please, that members and staff, that this meeting is being recorded and that the recording will be made available on the Bay of Plenty Regional Council website following this meeting. Can I also please, maumahara noa, a kind reminder to all present that local government decision-making affords no protection to councillors, council officers and the public for comments made during meetings. They're subsequently challenged in a court of law and determined to be slanderous. We've not had any of that for the year of 2024, and I'm sure members have no intention for that to occur as part of our final hui this morning. We will move on. Morena, we will move on to agenda item 1, which is apologies. We have received apologies this morning from Mayor Tania Tapsell of Rotorua Lakes Council and Councillors Campbell and Scott from Bay of Plenty Regional Council. Are there any further apologies this morning? If there are none, can I invite please a mover for the apologies? I have a mover and Deputy Mayor Kai Fong, second, and Deputy Mayor Scholar, forgive me, Jen, and Deputy Mayor Scholar. All those in favour, please signal aye. Aye. Those against, there are none. The apologies are carried.
Sorry, I've just got a message from Councillor Kevin Schuler, who can't get in the meeting. He's trying to join online.
Thank you. Very good. If we can leave that with the team, please, to reach out to Councillor Schuler, Kevin Schuler. Kevin Schuler. If we could reach out, he is trying desperately to come into the meeting today. We'll leave that with the admin team, please, to connect. Thank you. And acknowledging, please, we have Mayor Drysdale from Tauranga City and Deputy Mayor Imick from Whakatane Council, alternate members of our committee joining us online as well. Moving on to agenda item 2, please. For public forum, we've received no requests for public forum. Agenda item 3, items not on the agenda, fairly procedural at the front end of this meeting. There are none. Agenda item 4, the order of business. There are no changes to the order of business of our agenda this morning. Agenda item 5, declarations of conflict of interest. Can I invite, please, from members, any declarations of conflict of interest with regards to any of the items on our agenda this morning? If there are none, we'll move on to agenda item 6, which is public excluded business to be transferred into the open, of which there are none. Like a galloping race this morning. We're up to agenda item 7 this morning. Committee, which is the minutes. Agenda item 7.1, we are on page 9 of our agenda, which is the Bay of Plenty Civil Defence Emergency Management Group Joint Committee minutes from our meeting that was held on the 27th of September 2024. Any questions or points of clarification with regards to the minutes?
Have to move, Madam Chair.
If there are none, we have a recommendation to confirm the minutes. I have a mover in Mayor Denia Do I have a seconder? I have a seconder in Mia Moore for the minutes from the 27th of September. All those in favour, please signal aye. Aye. Those against, there are none. The minutes and the item is carried. On to agenda item 8, which is presentations this morning. Agenda item 1. We're joined this morning by Paul Renshaw and Louisa Prattley for a presentation regarding the NEMA Space Weather Programme. We are joined via Zoom. Morena Korua, welcome in this morning. Thank you for joining us. Technology is a wonderful thing to enable some of this remote access and participation. We're in your hands. Morena, and welcome.
Morena, thank you, Madam Chair. Louisa, I'll get you to share your screen, please.
Can you see that?
We can see that nice and big. Thank you. Beautiful.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Paul Renshaw tōku ingoa. I am the team leader for planning and the program manager for our catastrophic planning program and space weather. Through the chair, I'd like to introduce my colleague today, Louisa Prattley, Senior Advisor Planning at NEMA, who has done a lot of the mahi in preparing us for this hazard and writing our national response plan. We would like to thank you for the opportunity to present to you today on this novel and what we think is an extremely fascinating hazard. Our objective today is to share situational awareness of space weather, what NEMA is doing about the hazard, and how this links in to the local and regional level. So I'll now hand over to Louisa to talk about space weather, what it is, why we are concerned, and really what we're doing about it. And then I'll talk about the linkages to NEMA's catastrophic planning program and the National Space Weather Response Plan. From there, we'll discuss the regional and local readiness for a space weather event and take any questions you may have. Thank you, Louisa.
Thank you, Paul. So yeah, just before we start, I'd like to just give a quick overview of what is space weather. So space weather describes an array of phenomena originating from the sun. So we're thinking solar flares, coronal mass ejections, and other energetic particles. It occurs continuously, much like terrestrial weather on Earth, but sometimes there are more extreme events and they can impact us, just like terrestrial weather can as well. So space weather in its more extreme form may damage or disrupt critical infrastructure and technology here on Earth and in the near Earth environment, causing a complex web of secondary and tertiary impacts, much like you can see on the screen here, causing general population impacts as well. So space weather has always existed, so you may be wondering, why are we concerned about this now? And there are 6 key reasons on the screen here. So space weather risk is increasing. We know that. We're coming into a period of increased solar activity, with the solar maximum commencing in October 2024. So this means we're in a heightened risk period, and these conditions will proceed until roughly the end of 2027. So there's a higher chance of space weather at the moment. Most importantly,
forgive me, Louisa, for just interrupting. We just haven't got movement on our presentation this morning. Can I just check
what slide are you seeing?
The intro.
The very first page. We're still at the start line. Louisa?
Can you see that change now?
So I understand from Administrator Amanda that you're sharing your screen, so you're actually in the driver's seat, Louisa, if that's okay. We're completely in your hands.
Can you see any difference now?
We can see you fully live, and only you.
And only me, okay. That's not what you are wanting to see. I'll start again.
We do have an ability to share from our end. No, Louisa, away you go. There we go.
Is that any better?
Yeah.
We're onto the space weather causes complex.
I might just stay on that screen if that's okay,
you.
just so we don't experience the same thing. So this is the slide I was talking about. Sorry, this has got the solar flares, the coronal mass ejections, and the energetic particles causing complex consequences to the general population. So that's really that web that I was talking about. You can see everything's interdependent, and that's going to cause issues for us here on Earth. Then I moved on to this slide, which is talking about space weather and why now. So we know that there's increased risk. We've entered the solar maximum and there's a heightened chance of space weather activity over the next few years.
Excuse me again, Louisa, forgive me. Is there any way we're able to move into presentation mode so we can see the entire presentation on the screen, please? We're just about there, third time lucky.
Okay, hopefully this won't, can you see that?
So maybe we should drive it from here.
Yeah, if you
We
can
might
share that
actually
would be better.
drive it from here and then we can see the full presentation if that's okay, Louisa. So sorry to interrupt you
great.
there.
Thank you.
We've got Amanda onto it right as we speak.
Apologies, Madam Chair. We're used to most of our presentations are in Teams, so Zoom is a little bit foreign for us.
That's not a problem at all, Paul. We're in Amanda's very capable hands this morning. I'm sure she'll take care of us.
Excellent.
I'm happy you interrupted me before I presented a whole presentation with no slides.
There we go.
Cool. If we just move forward to that next slide, please.
And we're just confirming that we will have this presentation shared
Yes.
as well to reinforce the presentation this morning, Your Worship. Thank you. We're back in your hands, Louisa. We're all yours.
Okay, third time lucky. Hopefully this works. Is there an echo?
No, you're good.
Oh, good. Okay. So along with the increased solar activity that we'll see over the next few years, we also have increased exposure to space weather because of our increased use of critical infrastructure and technology and that really critical dependence that we have on that these days, which is still growing. Our vulnerabilities to space weather are also growing because of those critical dependencies. So that's really combining to increase our risk. We know that a space weather event could have catastrophic consequences for New Zealand and globally at the same time. And that could cost New Zealand billions over just a short few day period in electricity lost load alone. Space weather is global in scale, so we cannot expect our international partners to help us like we may be able to some of our other hazards. And it's also concerning because New Zealand will be behind larger markets in terms of electricity replacement parts. And we saw during COVID that it's very hard to get pieces of infrastructure into New Zealand when that's needed, when we're competing with other larger markets. And that may take months to years to replace if we are in that position. We've already touched on the increased solar activities requiring action as soon as possible. And we also need to understand the novel and complex risk that we in New Zealand and globally for a less risky future. Next slide, please, Amanda. So there are actions we can take for a less risky future. We can't do much about the hazard, but we can undertake planning and other readiness activities to manage the exposure and vulnerability and build resilience for New Zealand. But these activities really do need to be taken in advance of the event. So in June, NEMA established our space weather program to coordinate space weather activities across NEMA and really drive forward NEMA's operational readiness and response arrangements at the national level. We had 3 key aims: to deliver the New Zealand Space Weather Response Plan, support system-wide activities, and address the gap in operational readiness and response. Over to you, Paul, to talk about the space weather and catastrophic planning link.
Excellent. Thank you, Louisa. So NEMA is tasked as the lead agency for managing the response to a space weather event for Aotearoa New Zealand. And as such, we've produced the National Response Plan. So to do this, we've been working with like-minded countries in readiness and response, our key partner agencies, stakeholders, and the science community. So as per other natural hazard events, the emergency management system will manage the consequences of the event and its impact to communities alongside all layers of government and the private sector. So this really leverages the work of the National Catastrophic Planning Program, addressing maximum level consequences and utilising a hazard agnostic methodology. So recent advances in science and technology alongside advanced modelling techniques have provided greater clarity on the likelihood and the consequences of catastrophic level events for us, for Aotearoa New Zealand. So the work done with the Catastrophic Planning Handbook is the beginning of the journey to really improve system readiness, provide a framework for nationally coordinating the response, and really encourage emergency management partners to address readiness gaps. So a catastrophe will disrupt the complex interconnected system of lifeline utilities and significantly decrease our quality of life for an extended period. The devastation caused by a catastrophic event will be extreme, with impacts that are difficult to foresee. It will overwhelm the emergency management system, government and commercial business as usual arrangements, and the required resources for the scale of response will not be available within New Zealand. International experience demonstrates that during a catastrophic event, decision makers are forced to prioritise resources to manage shortfalls rather than adequately address all needs at once. So, while the Space Weather Response Plan outlines the unique requirements for managing a space weather event, the Catastrophic Event Handbook will provide the guidance for managing national level consequences. So what we've done is position the Space Weather Response Plan underneath the Catastrophic Planning Program. And that means that the Space Weather Response Plan is the first hazard-specific plan under the CAT Plan program. So the Catastrophic Event Handbook, which is the high-level, nationally focused product of the Catastrophic Planning Program, is currently with NEMA's CE and Director for approval. We anticipate releasing this handbook in early or around February 2025 next year. And in the meantime, it really represents system-level planning that has improved New Zealand's capability to manage a maximum credible event. Next slide, please. So the National Space Weather Response Plan. It was publicly released last week and can be found on our NEMA website. The plan focuses on the specific hazard of space weather at the national level. So it coordinates the actions of agencies and key stakeholders during the initial response phase of a space weather event. It sequences actions by operational phases, so it's in line with the Catastrophic Event Handbook, taking into account the specific space weather threats through time and against critical infrastructure disruptions. So it makes an array of assumptions, as all good plans do, including the activation of the ODESC system and the NCMC, so the National Crisis Management Centre, and assumes a state of national emergency would be declared. So you can start to see the scale of response we're expecting. So while the plan does not cover local or regional planning, we think this provides really useful guidance to do so. Next slide, please. So what does this all mean for the local and regional level? So there is no direct risk to humans, so I'll emphasize that, humans or animals from space weather, with only a minor increase in radiation exposure if you happen to be in an aircraft at 35,000 feet within the exposure area. So that level of exposure would be similar in scale to really a small X-ray. However, there is potential for lengthy power outages. At the extreme level, this could be weeks, months, or even years. So there's a small window of opportunity to make decisions. And as we're reliant on international space weather monitoring, this timeframe may be reduced considerably depending on what they're doing about it. So space weather is a global hazard. Impacts will be widespread, meaning obtaining the equipment to restore infrastructure may be delayed by international demand. And as Louisa pointed out, we're at the end of what is a vulnerable and complex supply chain. And when other countries are really competing for those resources, it'll make things quite interesting for us. So what can you do about it? We would ask that you ensure your regional and local council BCPs, your business continuity plans, are updated to look at the management of this hazard on your business. Encourage your communities, your businesses and your industries in your region to get ready. The important thing to note here is that if your emergency plans or your BCPs already account for lengthy power outages, then you are mostly there. And this is because space weather is really impacting on our infrastructure. It may result in reduced communications, but the biggest thing for us is around that power outage and the second, third order effects from that. So, we've got 15,000 medically dependent people in New Zealand. How do we manage those? So that's really the sorts of things we're looking at here. All right, next slide, please. That brings us to the end of the presentation. Thank you. It's always a privilege to present on the work of our team at NEMA, and I really hope this has been of use to you, and I'll invite any questions, please.
Yeah, Luca.
Power issues. What's NEMA's position on distributed versus centralised energy generation? Because distributed is probably much more resilient to these sorts. At least you only take out, more limited effect. Have a limited influence. Whereas with our present centralised systems, you take out a big power generating stations and you knock out a lot of facilities. So should there be a stance on this?
That's a great question. We have been working with Transpower throughout the program and really understanding what they're doing about it. They've been aware of space weather as a hazard for quite some time, and they've been doing their very best to build resilience into that centralised power distribution network. And we're working with them on what future resilience looks like, and that's really putting capacitors in those really vulnerable line areas. And what's vulnerable in the central distribution network is the long or lengthy line networks that are actually pointed in a certain direction. So we know that there are various parts of the network that are more vulnerable than others, and more regions that are more vulnerable than others. So that really represents the work that's going on in the background as well. Louisa, have you got anything more to add on that?
No, I think you've covered that well, Paul. I think confirming that we've been working really closely with Transpower, who have also set up an electricity industry working group. So this includes the generators as well and distributors. So I think it's really a lot of the electricity sector are involved in this work and looking at resilience for them.
Thank you. We'll hear from His Worship Medenya, followed by Deputy Mayor Imink online. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Do you have a sort of scale of how severe and how likely these events are? So when we have floods, you talk about a AEP event or exceedance, or you have 1 in 500 year tsunami, or there's the Alpine fault, sort of 50% in the next 50 years, figures along those lines. So is there something similar for space weather?
Yeah, there is actually. We are currently in a solar maximum, which means that this is the heightened period of solar activity. So every 11 years, we know that the sun rotates on its axis, and we're in that time, and that makes us more vulnerable to when it throws out those solar flares and the coronal ejections as well. So we are really in that heightened period now. There's several international space monitoring entities that we are linked into pretty closely, NOAA being one of them. And they've got pretty good websites that really monitor and advise on the space weather activity. And if you go into the NOAA website, they're sort of looking at some current activity right now. So back to your point around, the scale and things like that, that's actually a point of discussion at the moment, because it goes to a maximum level, which I think is 5, Louisa, which actually accounts for sort of a major event, but doesn't give us the scale to go, actually, it's worse than that. So Louisa will be able to articulate that a bit more eloquently. Louisa.
Yeah, I am wondering whether you're talking about two different things. So the scale that Paul is talking about is how we rank the hazards in terms of similar to like magnitude for earthquake. The question I think was somewhere around probability and likelihood and comparing that to other natural hazards in New Zealand. So if I've understood that correctly, space weather events, we're thinking maybe around 2 different types. And this is where it gets a bit confusing, as Paul was talking about the scale, because it's really hard to differentiate between big and really big. But an extreme space weather event where we'd be thinking about actually turning off the national grid is around 30% likelihood in the next 50 years. So somewhere between the Alpine Fault and a small Taranaki eruption. But a space weather event like the one we saw in May, that though they were still the same scale, they were very different, and that event in May still really stretched the New Zealand government arrangements, and that's almost certain. There's a 99.5% chance that will happen again in the next 50 years. So we do need to be prepared.
Thank you.
Great, thank you, Your Worship. Deputy Mayor Emig. If we can just have an unmute from your end, please, Deputy Mayor Emig.
Beg your
Wonderful, thank
pardon.
you.
Good morning, everyone, and thanks for the presentation.
Morena.
Yeah, pretty interesting, and my question has partly already been answered by Louise's last little blurb. In terms of, if we're trying to explain this to a community member, like a space weather event, are you talking about a geomagnetic storm that impacts all our communications? And if that's correct, and you said that you guys facilitated and put out all the warnings, and we need to have our operating procedures running parallel, I don't know what are our operating procedures regionally or locally.
Great question, Louisa. Do you want to?
Sure. Yes, you're absolutely right. And part of NEMA's forward program for 2025 is really getting that consistent messaging right for the public education. We really feel strongly that the first time the public are hearing about this shouldn't be when they receive an emergency mobile alert. So that is one of our top priorities. As for the Bay of Plenty region, I think things are actually pretty good there. We've done a lot of presentations. We've gone to the KEG, the Lifelines group and whatnot, and Bay of Plenty really are thinking about this and what this means for the community. So that's a good step forward already. But we will make sure that all of the messaging is consistent. And we have templated emergency mobile alerts as well that can be designed and adapted for different audiences.
I think it just as a keep the language simple.
Yes, yeah.
Thank you.
And I think, Deputy Mayor, if your region's response plans, which we know they are looking at those consequences for communities and things, and look at a power outage, then really you're 90% there for what a space weather hazard would represent as well.
Can I ask a supplementary, Madam Chair?
Pause, Deputy Mayor Emig.
All of this satellite stuff going up into the atmosphere, does that increase the risk of geomagnetic space weather events?
It doesn't increase the risk, but it does increase our exposure, so it doesn't make the event more likely is what I'm trying to say, but it does increase our exposure and our vulnerability. So we may feel more impacts because of that. So it's just really important that if we're thinking about Starlink or other alternative communication methods, that we do keep in mind that we can't primarily rely on a single source of that because they'll be vulnerable for different reasons.
And sorry, one more question. Sorry. Like I kind of follow Rocket Lab and their launches, and when they have the delays, it's because of space weather events. Do they have access to more intelligence than you guys do that they could share?
I would say they have a lot more intelligence than we do. I'm sure they're very progressed in this space. Any thoughts on that, Paul?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'd be interested to find out, Deputy Mayor. Well, that's something that's quite intriguing, actually. I'm sure, as Louisa said, they're quite connected with their international partners as well and very aware of what's going on. And the satellites that they're launching are obviously quite vulnerable, as Louisa said. During the May event, there were hundreds of satellites that had to maneuver to really, some of them were thrown off course and all that sort of stuff. So they had to maneuver to get out of the way, basically, and then get back into their trajectory. So, that's that sort of minor impact on telecommunications and things like that.
Yeah, and that's shortening their lifespan.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Imik Miluka.
These are coronal mass ejections that happen on an 11-year cycle. I've got a graph that shows sunspots and, you know, it goes up in waves and everything. What about the intensity? I mean, the sunspot activity goes in pulses, but, you know, the intensity of the electromagnetic fields. And then we must also have historical accounts, because these happen on 11-year cycles, during which we've had power grids. So I'm just wondering what the historical experience is in terms of, you know, the intensity of events and how infrastructure has been affected in the past.
Sure. Would you like me to take that, Paul, or are you?
Yeah, that is a great question, and I can't remember exactly what year. It wasn't that long ago where there was a major emergency event that they were dealing with in the States, and a space weather event happened at the same time, taking out a lot of the communications and things around that area. So it made actually responding to that initial hazard a lot trickier when they couldn't communicate. Also extends back to the 1800s when we didn't have a power grid, which is our reference point. And Louisa, you might be able to talk about that a little bit more, but that was really the Carrington event that is the sort of base level worst case scenario for us. If that happened, if that scale of event happened now, obviously in a more electrically dependent environment, it would be potentially catastrophic. Louisa.
Sorry, what
Yeah,
year did you say the Carrington event was?
It was 1859.
1859.
Yeah.
Yeah, so thanks, Paul. That was a great overview. So we have had, well, starting with the hazard piece and the increased intensity. So the 11-year cycle is more about increased frequency of events because there's more sunspots during that time. But we know that an extreme space weather event could actually happen at any time during that cycle. It's just more likely at the 11-year peak. And in terms of reference points, we are very limited because the Carrington event, while big, doesn't represent our modern day society where we have increased critical dependencies. So we can only really draw some similarities, but we know that event now would be much worse. In 2001, New Zealand lost, I think, 2 transformers to space weather. And then in Canada in 1989, they lost power in the whole Quebec province for 9 hours for 9 million people. And there are other reference points, but in terms of that big event, we don't, there's a lot of uncertainty around how that would play out, but we do know that it could be catastrophic with long restoration times.
If I may. Yeah, no, that's sort of what I was asking, because you can see the frequency of sunspot activity, but have we actually been monitoring field intensity anywhere, or is it difficult to do, I suppose?
I'm not aware of the monitoring directly of field intensity, but that's not to say there isn't any. It would just be internationally. We're very reliant on our international partners. We don't do any direct monitoring ourselves.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Great, thank you, Tim. If there's nothing further, I would like to thank you, Kora, ngā mihi to Paul Renshaw and Louisa Prattley. Thank you for your presentation and for bringing to this table an awareness of what is happening in the NEMA Space Weather Program conversation. The arts, of course, is taking a lot of those high-level concepts and actually conveying them to the people who live in our communities that are possibly less familiar with a lot of the scientific terms that have been tabled. And later in the agenda, committee members, I would suggest we are receiving a report back on the first quarter of what is our 5-year group plan, rather than having a separate siloed piece of work specifically around space weather program that will sit and possibly be forgotten. I possibly think we're in our current group plan, just that given that we're just kicking off into that Director Crow, where that might sit and fit later in the agenda. There are a list of project descriptions. If it's not already there, I just didn't see it in the descriptions in the agenda. But just to ensure that that doesn't get lost alongside all the other hazards that have been identified in terms of our 4 hours readiness. Director Crowe, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So we are just working through the first draft of the hazardscape document. I would expect to see it picked up in there. It is probably fair to say this is a relatively new hazard for CDM to be working with. So I think we'll pick it up in the hazardscape report, and that'll then pull through some priority work streams into the work program.
Appreciated, Director Crowe. And then, of course, once it's captured at a Bay of Plenty regional level, then it will transcend down through the system and process to our local territorial authority teams that sit in each of our communities. Thank you. Thank you both. If I can invite, please, a mover and a seconder to receive the report that's just been presented. I have a mover in Mayor Luka and a seconder in Deputy Mayor Kai Fong. All those in favour, please signal aye. Aye. Those against? I see none, there are none. The item is carried. We are moving on, please, team, to agenda item 9, which is reports, and there are some decisions required. We're on page 22 of our agenda this morning. Agenda item 9.1, Bay of Plenty CDM Group statutory appointments. Director Crowe, we're in your hands. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a report that we see relatively often, somewhat procedural in terms of looking at our controller and recovery manager appointments. We have 7 changes proposed to this cycle. Some are appointments, some rescindments, and they cover both recovery managers and controllers. Would you like me to work through those, Chair?
Yes, please. Director Crowe, we will just that where the Act specifically is referenced, it's just good practice for us to get a reminder of the legislation that sits behind these appointments and rescindments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we have 3 appointments, or at least 2 appointments as local controllers under Section 27(1) of the CDM Act. It's for Antoinette Campbell for Opotiki District Council as local controller, Paula Warbrook, representing Rotorua Lakes District Council as a local controller. We're looking at an appointment under Section 30, subsection 1, for Sarah Ellis as a recovery manager for Whakatane District Council. And then we move into several rescindments. Rod Barnett, local recovery manager for Western Bay. Steve Perdia as local recovery manager for Whakatane District. Jared McCormick as local controller for Opotiki, and Cara Gordon as an alternate group controller for the Bay of Plenty CDM Group. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Crowe. So we have 7 changes. Do I have a mover for all 7 recommendations this morning? I have a mover in Deputy Mayor Kai Fong and a seconder in Deputy Mayor Scholar. Very good. All those in favour, please signal aye. Those against? The item is carried. Thank you. Moving on, please. We're at page 28 of our agenda this morning, agenda item 9.2, which is the Bay of Plenty CDM Group Office Quarterly Performance Monitoring Report for 2024-25 for the first quarter. We are joined again by MBOP, Emergency Management Bay of Plenty Planning Manager, Chris Brewer. We're in your hands, Mr. Brewer. Thank you.
Morena anō, through the chair. So this, as stated, is the update on the Bay of Plenty CDM Group Office Quarterly Performance Monitoring Report for Q1 of this financial year. And this presents how we're tracking against all of the annual plan activities which were approved in our previous group meeting back in September. We're able to get almost real-time data for this reporting, so the report is actually accurate up to the 28th of November. And just further to Mark's comment on the catastrophic, the space weather program, this is also included in our catastrophic planning work, which is item number 8 in the current financial year annual plan activities. And there's going to be a further phase proposed in the 2025-26 annual plan activities, which we'll bring forward for approval in the new year. So it's being worked on. Just a very quick summary of our performance monitoring for this quarter, our first quarter, is that all the projects that have commenced are on track. The remainder that are yet to start are scheduled to start in quarter 3 and 4 of this financial year, and there are no activities at risk. If there were projects, activities at risk, this would be clearly outlined in this performance monitoring report going forward. So what we're asking here is that this way of reporting, this approach, is endorsed. We've had endorsement from both KEG and KEGLA. So we're now seeking endorsement for this way of reporting moving forward. Happy to take any feedback or questions.
Committee members, Deputy Mayor Schooler.
Thank you very much. And just this is helping us to understand how we might be reporting too. So it's nice to have your suggestions. So in the event that there was something not on track, you would highlight that in the executive summary. Is that correct? How would you highlight that to us?
Yeah, good question. That would be outlined upfront in the executive summary and also in the graphs which are on page 31 through to 30 to 33.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I have Deputy Mayor Imig. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. I'm just looking on page 32, item number 13, where it says generate a development program for elected members, not yet started, but for quarter, you've got it started for June. Is that wise to pop that in there, considering there's an election next year? Wouldn't it be better to do it the following first quarter?
So this will be a development program that is future focused. So as well as for current elected members, it's building the plan that's going to be available for use moving into the future. Looking to start it anywhere between the start of quarter 3, which will be the first week back in January. Yeah.
So it's not like a one-off elected member training, it's a training development program.
That's correct.
Right, thank you.
If there's anything from committee members, thank you for that. Manager Brewer, appreciate your presentation this morning. If I can invite, please, we have 2 recommendations. Recommendation 1, to receive the report by Plenty Sedum Group Office Quarterly Performance Monitoring Report for 24-25, the first quarter, and 2, to endorse, thank you, Deputy Mayor Imig, to endorse the proposed approach to reporting for the remainder of the 24-25 financial year and moving forward. Do I have a mover? I have a mover in Mayor Moore. Do we have a seconder? I have a seconder in Deputy Mayor Kai Fong. All those in favour, please signal aye. Aye. Those against? There are none. The item is carried. We're at information only. Agenda item 9.3, the Bay of Plenty Sedum Group Training KPI measurement. Director Crow, we're in your hands. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. You'll see the KPI measurement document, and we'll take that primarily as read, but what I would like to do is just highlight a couple of changes that have occurred in the report structure for your attention. First one is we've included some specific statistics around leadership in your EOCs and the ECC, and that pertains to some specific tracking of the controllers, recovery managers, both appointments and progression through the development pathway that was previously approved. That's the first change, and the second change is inclusion toward the rear of the report, your page 41, where we've started to provide some financial tracking against budget. So we have a budget allocation that comes from, we call it the TEC fund, but to remove any confusion, it's the Tertiary Education Commission allocation. So as opposed to TEC, it comes from Tertiary Education Commission. It's an annual apportionment, if you like, from NEMA, and I'm just providing some tracking. It's a calendar year budget, so it works slightly different to the financial year, but you can see year on year as we progress through how group is expending that money. So that's the second change included. Happy to take any questions as relevant.
Any questions from committee members? Points of clarification. Deputy Mayor Scola.
Thank you. And again, I think this is similar to my learning stage, but again, when I read the executive summary, I would like to see in there, this report does not highlight any risks for the author or not, but it would be, we did recently have a meeting workshop and we just were told that if there's a view in the executive summary, we of course can confirm that, but to me, having there are no risks attached to this report in the view of, obviously, of the author would be useful for me as a new committee member. I can look at the charts and think, what am I trying to read in that one? So that would be useful if that's possible, please.
Wonderful, Deputy Mayor Scola. There actually is no harm in stating the obvious and having those statements made up front. Completely agree if we can work that in with our administration. And the benefit, dare I say, of new membership and new eyes to remind us of some things. When you're more familiar, you actually possibly potentially know that, but actually there's no harm in making those statements much more deliberate and clear up front. Thank you. We'll take that on board and take that in. Appreciate that. Any other points of clarification or questions from elected members, from committee members? If there are none, we do have a recommendation, which is on page 34 of our agenda, to receive the report Bay of Plenty Sedum Group Training KPI measurement with future inclusion as suggested by Deputy Mayor Scola. Can I call for a mover, please? I will actually just take that, so fairly procedural, forgive me, Deputy Mayor, we have been all learning together in this new triennium where we have the main member in attendance as we do. No, forgive me, I've done that in the past. This is why I actually know that, Deputy Mayor. If I can invite, please, one of the members. I do have a mover in Mayor Denyer, please, and a seconder. I have a seconder. For clarity, with the apology from Mayor Tapsell, then the alternate member and Deputy Mayor Kai Fong comes. I have a seconder and Deputy Mayor Kai Fong. All those in favour, please signal aye. Aye. Are there any against? There are none. The item is carried. We're moving on, please, to agenda item 9.4, which is a verbal update from Director Crowe of Emergency Management Bay of Plenty. Director Crowe, we're in your hands. Thank you.
Thank you once again, and hopefully this is the last time you hear from me this morning. There are 6 items I'd just like to give you a quick update on, primarily because they aren't covered elsewhere in today's agenda, but just things I'd like you to be aware of. A couple resultant risks that I'd just like to put on your radar. Not necessarily resulting in any actions at this stage, but just something I'd like to make sure you have some awareness of. He mentions risks and then goes straight into a positive. So a couple of key appointments just within the MBOP Group Office. The Kairahi Māori role, you may be aware, has been open with us for some time. That role has now been filled by Esme Whariwera, who commenced with us on the 2nd of December. My apologies, Fiona, for that one. And the second one is the replacement for Cara Gordon. So the appointment has been made of James Jefferson. So James comes to us from Kapiti Coast District Council, where he's been the Regulatory Services Manager for a number of years and a local controller both there and in his previous appointment at Porirua City. So James will commence with the group office on the 15th of January when we're back to work. So we're very much looking forward to having James within the team. It's the first item. Second item is an update on the tsunami project. As you'll all be aware, that's a significant piece of work for the group and in fact for all your councils as well. The initiator to that is the modelling that's been undertaken by GNS and peer reviewed by NIWA, sorry Lily. There has been, when GNS ran the model initially about 6 weeks ago, it highlighted a few things that they needed to look at that they felt were inconsistencies in the modelling. When they've drilled into that further, the assumptions in the back of the model, there was a couple more errors than they thought. So I suppose what I'm conveying to you is there has been a variation to that contract for time and time only, just to give them some more time to work through the variables in the back of the model. And we expect that to be run again early in the new year. So we'll provide a further update at the next seating for the Joint Committee. Another one of interest is Lisa Glass. We all know Lisa quite well, is currently on her way back actually from a conference on risk, emergency and business continuity in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia. So Lisa was one of 3 participants from New Zealand selected or invited at least by the conference organisers at their expense to join and make a presentation to the conference, which Lisa did on Wednesday night, thank you, and I believe it was very successful. So Lisa's on her way back to us now, and no doubt we'll take a briefing from Lisa as to how that went on her return. I would remind members that the CDM Resilience Fund is currently open for applications that close on the 31st of January. So that's a contestable fund, again managed by NEMA, of which members and the group office have been quite successful beneficiaries of in the past. There are, as far as I'm aware, a couple of applications coming from the Bay to date that I'm aware of. One's TCC and one is through Whakatane District Council. The focus this year for NEMA is on flood resilience and tsunami resilience. So I think the applications sort of along those work streams are favoured in their decision making. The 5th item for your awareness is the Emergency Management System Improvement Programs. It's called MSIP, which is the flow-on work streams from last year's review into the North Island severe weather events. Now, there's a lot I can say about this. I'm probably best to hold off on a lot of that, and the reason I'll put it that way is concurrent to this meeting, there's another one happening which Stace Tahiri's attending at the moment, where they're working through those work streams, the work program and timeframe. So I think to go any further into that will potentially be misleading the forum. We'll come back in the new year once those timelines are better defined through the Regional Partnerships Unit at NEMA. The last one I want to put on your radar, and I'll just touch this lightly, and the reason I introduce it is you may have seen in the media a sort of a shrinking lid policy and some budgetary constraints, particularly at GNS. And GNS perform our tsunami 24-hour monitoring and warning centre in conjunction with NEMA. So there's been some commentary in media that the budget constraints and reduction, in fact, are going to impact the level of service that we can expect from GNS and therefore present a potential risk on the tsunami warning. But I would pause there to say that's about as far as that is at the moment. NEMA is being very proactive on working with GNS to ensure that there isn't a reduction in level of service, and then we, sitting directly behind NEMA, are working with them on any residual risk that may present. So whilst it's in the media and you may have noted it, I suppose my intent with this article is to make you aware that we know it's there. We're working proactively with GNS and NEMA to ensure the level of service is maintained. And if that changes, or the way in which we do that changes, we just want to assure you that we are in front of that. And that concludes my report, but I'm happy to take any questions on any article. Thank you.
Questions from committee members, please. What I just might offer and add to the report from Director Crowe is that post the September meeting, very early in the month of October, both Director Crowe and I hosted the Minister of Emergency Management here in Tauranga,
with a visit to the team while there was a training program, and also hosted Member of Parliament, List MP Andy Foster. I believe it was the following day. I might just add that as well while they were in recess. Happy for you to speak to that, Director Crow. Thank you.
Thank you, my mission. Thank you.
Medenya.
Just a very quick clarification. That contestable fund managed by NEMA, what was the name of that again, please?
CDM Resilience Fund.
CM.
Yeah, so Civil Defence Emergency
CDEM,
Management.
okay,
Yeah,
yeah.
CDM Resilience Fund.
Thank you.
Yeah, Luca.
You mentioned a number of positions that have been filled. I didn't catch which ones they were.
Through the chair, they are the Kairahi Māori role, so that sits within Emergency Management Bay of Plenty, and the Principal Advisor Emergency Management, which is also an alternate group controller.
Are there any, do you have any more positions that haven't been filled, or you've got basically filled everything?
No, the roster is full at the moment, subject to any other movements.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Luca. If there's nothing further from committee members, please, we do have a recommendation to receive the verbal report. Let me just have a look. I've got some numbering matters here. To receive the verbal report from Director Crow as at December 2024. Do I have a mover? I have a mover, and Deputy Mayor Kaifong, I'm happy to second that recommendation. All those in favour, please signal aye. Aye. Those against? There are none. The item is carried. We are moving on to agenda item 9.5, which is the National Emergency Management Agency. Te Rākau Whaku Maru, which has been referred to all throughout this meeting as NEMA. We have lots of acronyms in this space. For the Civil Defence Emergency Management, or CEDM, Joint Committee as at the 13th of December 2024. As always, we're very blessed to be joined by Lily Fords, our Regional Emergency Management Advisor. Ms. Fords, we're in your hands. Thank you.
Kia ora mai tātou. Thank you through the chair. NEMA has provided a written update which will be taken as read. Happy to take any questions. I will summarise. Mark Crow, Director of MBOP, provided a good summary about the Emergency Management System Improvement Program, which is NSIP. The key point in the summary about that is that the Cabinet expects a roadmap which provides good outline about the implementation program for MSIP that is due in February 2025. For the benefit of new committee members, for awareness, the government has, through the Minister of Emergency Management and Recovery, intends to submit a new bill on the emergency management this term. So related to MSIP and an update about that. Happy to take any questions. Ngā mihi nui kia tātou.
Any questions? And we are on pages 43 and 44 of our agenda this morning. Team, if there are none, we do have a recommendation, please, to receive the update from the National Emergency Management Agency and NEMA through our Regional Emergency Management Advisor. Do I have a mover, please, to receive the report? I have a mover in Mayor Moore. We have a seconder. I have a seconder in Deputy Mayor Kaifong. All those in favour, please signal aye. Aye. Those against? There are none. The item is carried. Before we move into the public excluded section, I've just had a lovely warm reminder from Administrator Nāmana, who's taking care of us today. Just earlier in the meeting, it's purely procedural. We did have a seconder in Deputy Mayor Scholar, which I'm actually happy to second in terms of receiving the apologies. Did we tidy that up, Administrator Nāmana, and catch that? Can we have a reminder, please, of who the mover was for the apologies earlier in the meeting? Let's go one at a time. We'll go apologies moved by, please, the reminder, who the mover was for the apologies. Does anyone recall who moved the apologies this morning? So it's recorded, it's just in the system somewhere that we just cannot access. We'll tidy this up as we get that. We'll finish the year nice and tidy. I'm happy to second that in terms of the apologies. And we also have a procedural correction for the statutory appointments. Moved by Deputy Mayor Kai Fong. I'm happy to second, if that keeps it nice and tidy. That was for the statutory appointments. I'm just checking that we've caught that. Administrator Nāmana, that was back on agenda item 9.1, which was page 22. Can I just see a show of support actually for both of those procedural corrections with regards to apologies? All those in favour, please signal aye for the seconding. Those against, there are none. Both corrections, and we've caught them in the meeting. Thank you, Administrator Nāmana, are carried. We're happy to continue on. Very good. We are on to the public excluded section, which is actually agenda item 10. For the specific grounds under section 48(1) of the Local Government Official Information and Meetings Act of 1987, often referred to as LGOIMA, we do have an incredible number of acronyms in the sector. For the passing of this resolution are section 48(1) part A, section 7, 2G, that withholding the information is necessary to maintain legal professional privilege. Can I call for a mover, please, to move into the public excluded? I have a mover in Mea Moa. I have a seconder in Mea Luka. All those in favour, please signal aye. Aye. Those against? There are none. The item is carried, and we can just press our public section resumes. Very good. We are at 11:24 a.m. With the readmission of the public, we're at agenda item number 13, which is the consideration of items not on the agenda, and at this stage there are none. Committee members, representatives of each of the communities across Toi Moana, our beautiful piece of paradise here in the Bay of Plenty, thank you for your candid participation, for your fight for each of our communities, for your kaitiakitanga, your guardianship and protection of the place that we call home. We'll welcome in our team. Welcome back in, Mr. Fraser. We're at 11:25 a.m. this morning, and we've come to the conclusion of our Civil Defence Emergency Management Group Joint Committee meeting, our final for the end of the 2024 year. To our staff, and actually to our Emergency Management Bay of Plenty, but also each of our controllers and recovery managers and each of our territorial authorities, thank you for your work. Thank you for what you do in terms of being able to convey the messages directly to the members of our community, hopefully taking these high-level messages and trying to convey them in a much more amenable way that the people in our community can understand the messaging to our committee members. It's been a very long year and a busy year, and we have been joined this year by our new whānau from Tauranga City Council. It's wonderful to have you. Can I wish you all the very best over this season? Please do take the time, the public-facing nature of the roles that we have and the expectation that sits with them can be quite high and demanding at times. May you find just time, be it on your own, be it by yourself, or may you actually be enriched with the authenticity, the generosity and aroha of people who fill your cup so that you can be refilled and refreshed for the new calendar year ahead. I'll invite any closing comments from committee members. I'll look online first. If there's any closing comments from committee members at all. No, wonderful. If we're happy from committee members, Deputy Mayor Skula.
I would just like to say thank you very much for the warm welcome and having been an apology for the last meeting, and it's where certainly this is very important for us at Tauranga City, and so with Mayor Mahe and Councillor Schuler and myself, as well as Marty, but thank you for the welcome, and so it's I also wish everyone a very Merry Christmas.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Scola. So to everyone from everyone, Merry Christmas. Spend time with your families. If there's nothing further, we have come to the end of our meeting, and we will invite back to the table, please, we've been in the very capable hands of Planning Manager Chris Brewer this morning. We've come to the end. Mr. Brewer, we're in your hands for closing karakia. Thank you.
Karakia whakamutunga. Ka whakaria te tapu, kia wātia ai te ara, kia tūruki whakataha ai, kia tūruki whakataha ai. Haumi e, hui e, tae ki.
Taiki, and we close our meeting at 11:28 a.m. Kia ora tātou.